June 16th, 2026. Well, we're still following up on the subject from last time, is peace at hand. Well, progress has been good so far. It looks like they're actually moving to a signing ceremony on Friday in Switzerland. Of course, one is hesitant to take too strong of a stand on this, considering what could happen. I mean, after all, it is the Middle East, and there's a lot of different players here. I mean, Hezbollah might have a vote in it too, and then again, everybody was going to. I don't know. I mean, this has been one of the problems I've had, is every time this thing has got mixed in, that somehow the situation with Hezbollah has got brought into this other discussion. And we know that Hezbollah can always do something to stir things up. It becomes a very tricky thing to maintain. And we don't know, even if we have a deal signed on Friday, which meets, let's say, some terms, can we really keep that thing tamped down long enough to really get to the election, for instance? So right now, it looks like that the deal that they have will basically reopen the Strait of Hormuz without any tolls or fees, as I understand it, for 60 days after it's been signed. And in return, we'll end our naval blockade against Iranian shipments, and everybody can get their oil tankers moving, which is already having a bit of a reduction in price of oil, which should eventually filter into gasoline shortly, if it's maintained. And so that's kind of where we are on this situation. And then other things, I guess, that of course, the ceasefire, and we don't know exactly what all's been agreed to. It looks like money won't change hands immediately, but down the road it might change hands if they, in fact, decide to behave themselves. And then during the 60-day period, they're supposed to negotiate the terms of the uranium. And as far as the missiles, I don't know what exactly is being discussed. That comes up in some of the conservative commentators' discussions, but I haven't heard whether that's really in there or not, and exactly what kind of limitation, if any, on missiles will it be. Because after all, we have to remember that that's basically what Iran has for self-defense, is their missiles. I mean, that's pretty core to their basic, capability. So I don't know. Obviously, we'd like them not to build any longer range missiles than the ones they already have, and I don't know. We're really hoping to actually get them to actually scrap the ones they have. I don't know. There's a lot of dispute over how many they have, and I suspect that we've destroyed a good part of them. People threw out that one intelligence estimate, but one thing you have to remember about those intelligence estimates, first of all, these people that are doing it are, let's say, not exactly administration friends, and second of all, they're probably taking a kind of a confidence level thing, like, what can we say with confidence that we got 30%? We're confident we got 30%. So that gets turned in, they have 70% left, which doesn't mean that's necessarily true. What it means is we're sure we got 30%. There's an uncertainty factor. Maybe we got 70%, in fact, but we don't have confidence in that. You see what I'm saying? So I think that's what's going on with that one. And so we'll have to, and we'll see, whether or not this thing actually happens on Friday. So far, nobody's been willing to release the text yet, perhaps because they're still negotiating the exact wording. I mean, they've got a signing date, but that seems a little precarious. And again, what's going to happen up in Lebanon? Because, Hezbollah has a vote, and Israel, I guess, can we get Israel to take a few punches while this is going on? Okay, let's say they did take the punches now, which is then, okay, you sign on Friday, and another Hezbollah attack happens on Saturday, and Israel retaliates, then what? You see what I'm getting at? I mean, the problem, everybody likes to say the problem isn't really Israel. The problem really is all these terrorist groups and the way they behave, and the degree to which they can be controlled. So anyhow, that's kind of the way I see that one. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or you can also follow me on Rumble, where I post as well. So anyway, that's kind of the way I see it, as a follow-up to what we were talking before. We'll just have to see how it goes, and it'll be interesting to see whether Trump actually goes back to is in the G7 meeting, and he will presumably not stay over there, I guess, all the way to Friday. So the theory is the vice president might come to sign it. And if the thing doesn't go well, maybe he'd rather have the vice president sign it. Huh? That's always a possibility. We don't know. It's hard to know on that, and we'll see what happens. But um, so that's kind of that situation. On the other situation, we've had the third tranche of the UAP stuff come out, of course, and haven't had it. I've been looking at it a little bit, and one of the interesting things I found in it, which I'd actually seen at least part of it before, I think, but I guess because a copy of this was put into U.S. government official records, it's then been released also along the lines of, okay, here we're releasing this, but it really is a declassified report from the Australians, their intelligence directorate, I believe it is. And the basic topic of the author written, I think this is around like the end of the 60s, I believe, around that time period, about the time that we were saying, Blue Book is over with and there's nothing to see here officially. This was addressing what the U.S. attitude toward the UFO subject was, as they called it then, and this author, kind of goes through a history of a variety of things, a lot of which I think is kind of his own research. But one of the things I found interesting is when we get to 1953, it states that in fact there was an actual interest in the U.S. government in quote anti-gravity unquote, and of course it also notes that this seems to be something that's contradictory to the accepted laws of physics that the mainstream, scientific community has, based on the general theory of relativity at the time, particularly, and even today. And it mentions that people such as Teller and John Wheeler and two or three other scientists were going to be asked to look into this for them. And I had. In fact, quite a while back on one of my space show appearances, I'd actually mentioned this issue, which I think is that, okay, if there really is no UFOs, if they don't really have positive proof of them, then why would this all of a sudden become an interest and they'd get some of the top people, which previously had worked with on the nuclear programs, particularly developing the A-bomb and the H-bomb, particularly Teller and Wheeler on the H-bomb, for instance. Well, he was also involved in the Manhattan Project as well. And of course, after this, there was a whole lot more focus on gravity research. Although I don't know if anybody found any anti-gravity, as far as I know. Nobody ever found that. But there was also situations where the Glenn Martin Company had put out some article, a popular article, the G engines are coming, suggesting that anti-gravity would be a thing that was on the way. And it is interesting to note that that Wheeler particularly had totally focused on nuclear physics pretty much, and that sort of thing prior to that in his research, and had been involved largely in the to a great extent in the both the Manhattan Project and the H-bomb project. All of a sudden, around that same time, 53, he's now left the H-bomb project and went back to academia at Princeton. And all of a sudden, he totally reorients his subject toward gravity and general relativity, and then does some self-study and prepares a course on general relativity, which he gives. And then after that, he starts doing research on it, gets involved with a scientist named Charles Mesner, who they work together on an attempt at a unified field theory, not the same one Einstein was going, but a sort of a different one, based on trying to trace the characteristics of the electromagnetic field's imprint in the gravitational structure of space-time. At any rate, and of course this one ultimately didn't really succeed. I wouldn't say it didn't succeed, but it did. There was a whole series of increasing work in the gravity field, and such things as the discovery of by Kerr, who does the so-called Kerr metric for the rotating black hole, which was done under a Air Force contract. And I can recall a publication of some of the work on this, which was done sponsored by the Battelle Memorial Institute, which is kind of notorious in the UAP subject. So I always thought that was a fascinating thing that this is in this one of these releases anyhow, the basic Australian paper, which basically suggested that the U.S. government had a secret interest in the subject beyond what they were saying publicly, particularly at the time it was written around 1970 in the Blue Book, which I thought was an interesting thing. There's a lot of other things in there about observational cases from FBI files and CIA files and things of that sort, which are more like the kind of thing you'd read in a typical book on the subject historically, where you're just talking about that some observer saw something and this is what they saw, you know. And in some cases, apparently the FBI created a kind of an artist rendering of what they saw. It's not a photograph, it's not a video like they had in the earlier ones. It's actually an actual artist, recreation, probably with AI. So that's kind of interesting. So far, I would say that almost everything that's been released at most is probably at the secret level, declassified, or just official use only level, or you know, it's now being released. But I don't think anything has been released that would fall out of a top secret special access program, which is probably where the real goods are located, assuming they're real goods. So I thought I'd kind of mention that's kind of another development here that we have, and of course, um, if we can see, we've been looking at the increasing number of Democrat socialists that are winning primaries, which will be interesting to see how this plays out. Hopefully, that most of them will lose, except in hardcore Democrat areas, like there's one of them running in D.C., and of course, what do you think is going to happen there, really? But the Democrats always win that place. It's overwhelmingly Democrat. But I'm thinking that some of the ones running in, say, Michigan and maybe Maine, and also this kind of character the guy got in the Texas area too. I think there's a fair chance if we get this war wrapped up favorably, then maybe we can get back on the offensive and maybe defeat these people. They may be just a little bit too extreme, even if people aren't exactly happy with us. And we'll have to see how that plays out. And meanwhile, I guess it does look like the Disclosure Day movie has been a fairly good success. I'm not sure it's a Titanic blockbuster, but I think it got worldwide near 90-some million in sales. So I think that certainly shows the topic's popular. And I hear that Avi Loeb has been brought in, the professor of astronomy emeritus from Harvard, has been brought into some kind of a UAP council for the White House. So it looks like they are getting more and more serious about this subject. We'll just see how far they push it. So anyway, I'll be wrapping that up for now. As always, I'll post this on YouTube and Rumble, and the address of my social media accounts in the description below. So all for this time.